welcome back to the Shakey Sonnet Show. I am Tootight Lautrec, the drag laureate of the Sonnetarium, and here we are once again in the Sonnetarium at the bottom of the down staircase in the permanently sequestered remainder section of an unnamed local library, which may or may not have two lions couchant on the front steps, who David Novak from David Novak Reads Poetry has kindly named Anadiplosis and Chiasmus. Couchant, couchant, sweet darlings, close your eyes and go to sleep while we quietly discuss the last two of the sonnets in the 1609 quarto of Shakespeare's sonnets. If you have been following along throughout this series and you end up here at sonnets 153 and 154, you might be thinking, what an odd couple of sonnets to end the sonnet series. If so, you're not alone. But, and it's a big but, it'll all make sense after a little celebratory cocktail party word, which is going to be anacreontic. A-N-A-C-R-E-O-N-T-I-C, anacreontic, which means written in the style of the ancient Greek poet Anacreon, known for his celebrations of love and wine. Anacreontic. Lovely. So, sonnets 153 and 154 are anacreontics, inspired by a pair of epigrams written by the Byzantine poet Marianus Scholasticus, first published in Greek in 1494 and translated into Latin in 1603. Nobody really knows when or where Shakespeare got his hot little hands on them in the original or the translation, but somehow he did, and he modeled these two sonnets after them. Now, anacreontic poems are generally in trochaic tetrameters, and trochees are the opposite of iambs. Iambs are unstressed stress, trochees are stressed unstressed. And a good example of a poem in trochaic tetrameter would be Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. 153 and 154 are not in trochaic tetrameter, but Shakespeare used those two poems to riff on the style. Still, Tootight Lautrec, drag laureate of the Sonnetarium and sovereign mistress over Iraq, you might be saying, that doesn't explain why these two poems occur here at the very end of the sonnet sequence. Well, one of our frequent sources, Catherine Duncan Jones, has proved that Samuel Daniels' sonnet sequence, Delia, spawned a whole series of books in which sonnet sequences are followed by a lyric interlude and a long poem, which prompted John Kerrigan, who is the editor of the Penguin edition of the sonnets that we've been using all along, it prompted him to note that, quote, when the first Jacobean readers opened Shakespeare's volume in 1609, they found something pretty familiar, a sequence of 152 sonnets in two groups, followed by two sonnets of anacreontic matter, overlapping versions of one fable, the whole being brought to a conventional close in A Lover's Complaint. And since we've mentioned the word complaint, I will digress by complaining that it seems that I will have to make one additional video sometime between soonish and someday, in which I consider A Lover's Complaint, because that is how it was published, the 154 sonnets plus A Lover's Complaint. Digression over. The fable on which these two are modeled is a simple fable and it's done twice. But the fable is that Cupid, the love god, falls asleep. His fiery hot love brand flops to the side. Virgin nymphs grab it, douse it in cold water, hoping to extinguish forever the sexual desire. Except, instead of cooling down the fiery hot love brand, it heats up the water, which creates either hot springs, which are healing, or love's warmth, which is the result of the firebrand heating up the water. So Katherine Duncan Jones, again, notes that epigrams were generally constructed in pairs with two different renderings of the same motif, hence Sonnet 153 and 154. She further notes, in both sonnets, Cupid's brand is given a body application, and both draw on the twofold association of hot baths with the treatment of sexually transmitted disease and with sexual encounters which may cause disease, a double association which goes back to antiquity. And she cites Marshall's epigrams as an example. Now, I'll talk a little bit later about the absolute necessity of reading sexuality and sexual innuendo into the sonnets in the sonnet series. But for now, let's press on to sonnets 153 and 154. Sonnet 153. Cupid laid by his brand and fell asleep. A maid of Dian's this advantage found, and his love-kindling fire did quickly steep in a cold valley fountain of that ground, which borrowed from this holy fire of love a dateless lively heat, still to endure, and grew a seething bath, which yet men prove against strange maladies a sovereign cure. But at my mistress' eye, love's brand new fired, the boy for trial needs would touch my breast. I, sick withal, the help of bath desired, and thither hied, a sad distempered guest, but found no cure. The bath, for my help, lies where Cupid got new fire, my mistress, I. So, the first quatrain is pretty clear. Cupid falls asleep, sets aside his brand or his torch, with phallic implications, Kerrigan helpfully notes. And a maid of Diana, the moon goddess, huntress, queen of virginity, one of these virgins gets a hold of the brand, which is the cause of all this trouble inflaming the hearts and the pants of men. And line 5, in line 5, this love brand, they douse it in the water, which borrowed from this holy fire of love. And Katherine Duncan Jones says that this holy fire may be a hint at it may be hinting spooneristically at fiery hole. So there are sexual innuendos all throughout. The firebrand, the cool well, the holy fire or the fiery hole. In any case, in the first two quatrains, the versions try to give Cupid's brand a cold shower, and it backfires. The brand stays hot, heats up the water, creating a seething bath that proves to be a sovereign cure against strange maladies. And many editors believe that this is an allusion to venereal disease. It may or may not be, but most people accept it. And as Katherine Duncan Jones had said earlier, this doubling of the meaning goes back to antiquity. In the third quatrain, but at my mistress's eye. So the love brand in the male seems to be all the problem, but the mistress's eye seems to be the thing that inflames all the hearts and the pants of men. My mistress's eye, love's brand new fired. So I tried to douse my love. I, sick withal, the help of path desired to cool me off from my mistress's eyes' hot looks at me, and thither hide, which I may take to saying every time I go somewhere that if I went to the bathroom, I thither hide. A sad, distempered guest. So then we get to the couplet. I thither hied a sad distempered guest, but no luck. I found no cure. The bath for my help lies where Cupid got new fire, my mistress's eye. In many editions you see mistress's eyes, plural, but in the 1609 quarto the eye is singular, and Booth helpfully points out the genital sense of eye, which we talked about a few sonnets ago, and he cites Henry V, Act 5, Scene 2, line 294, where they talk about the naked seeing self, and Chaucer's Miller's Tale, which talks about her nether yea. So the idea of eye as the vagina is rampant throughout the Elizabethan times and even before then. So that's the basic setup. 154 is a repetition, I think slightly better done. Let's get into that. Sonnet 154. The little love god, lying once asleep, laid by his side his heart-inflaming brand, whilst many nymphs that vowed chaste life to keep came tripping by. But in her maiden hand the fairest votary took up that fire, which many legions of true hearts had warmed. And so the general of hot desire was sleeping by a virgin hand disarmed. This brand she quenched in a cool well by, which from love's fire took heat perpetual, growing a bath and healthful remedy for men diseased. But I, my mistress thrall, came there for cure, and this by that I prove. Love's fire heats water, water cools not love. So in 153, we sort of dispatched with the story of the virgin stealing the wand, the fiery wand, and putting it in the water in the first two quatrains. But 154 takes all three quatrains in order to heat up the well. And we've got flaming brand, check. Hands, check. Hearts, check. The general of hot desire by a virgin hand disarmed. Use your imagination for the barely submerged subtext there. Don Patterson builds upon Booth's sexualization of the idea of well as vagina in this quenched in a cool well by suggesting that cool well is a virginal vulva, which once the general of hot desire is dipped into it, heats up forever, which I suppose is good for a male fantasy, but it doesn't necessarily play out in real life, as our poor narrator seems to have found out. Perhaps he considered his general of hot desire a general of hot desire, whereas she may have thought it was barely private, third class. Who knows? However, ever the optimist, our narrator connects the fun of sex with the satisfaction of love in the line, growing a bath and healthful remedy for men diseased. Men who are diseased, who could be sick at heart, who could be lonely and unloved, or who could have venereal disease. Mostly, I think, the narrator seems to recognize that love, romantic, erotic love, is a cure for the lonely heart and the ache of loneliness. And then we get to the couplet. I, my mistress's thrall, came there for cure, and this by that I prove, love's fire heats water, water cools not love. So I, my mistress's thrall, he's a slave to love, but in a good way. And I came to the well for cure, which is perhaps the consummation of love, which is a cure for desire, for, a little while anyway. Or I came to give myself a cold shower to cure myself of desire for someone who doesn't want me. And then, of course, the implications of the hot springs, which are healthy, and also an implication of a cure for venereal diseases, which was, as I said before, suffumigation in a pickling vat with cinnabar, which is mercury sulfide. So I came for a cure, but alas, there is no cure for love. And this ending idea that water cannot quench love echoes a line from the Song of Solomon, which is a very weird, wonderful book in the Bible. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's not that long. And it's a celebration of erotic love, and it's a back and forth exchange between a man and a woman and what appears to be a chorus of women. And in the first canticle, the woman says, "I am black but comely," which sound familiar? Mistress with your raven eyes? Yes, it does. And in the last canticle, Canticle 8, we get this. And this is a translation from the Geneva Bible, which is the Bible that Shakespeare probably used because the King James Version hadn't been written or translated yet. So this is Canticle 8, at the end of Canticle 8 in the Geneva Bible, from Song of Solomon. "Set me as a seal on thy heart, and as a signet upon thine arm, for love is strong as death, jealousy is cruel as the grave. The coals thereof are fiery coals, and a vehement flame. Much water cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it." So we've certainly seen our share of the fiery coals of jealousy in this series. And here's the whole idea of love will not cool water. Water cannot cool love. And Don Patterson perspicaciously notes that we come from Sonnet 151 to here, and in Sonnet 51, you'll remember, "From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die." Beauty's rose, hello, firebrand. Which, and then it goes on to say, "But thou," and in Sonnet 1, thou is the handsome young man, but in 134, thou could be replaced by love in general. "But thou feedst thy light's flame with self-substantial fuel." And Patterson finds this circuitous looking back on Sonnet 1 and bringing some of Sonnet 1's themes into Sonnet 154 to make for a beautiful, cohesive whole. So, do we have a gender? We have a gender. My mistress I, Sonnet 154, and my mistress thrall, 153, my mistress I, and 154, my mistress thrall. Perhaps I need another dose of anacreontic matter to make my hand a little steadier. So we do have a gender. Dramatically, where could this fit in Shakespeare's dramatic oeuvre? Any play within a play. Love's Labour is Lost, Midsummer Night's Dream, any place where ancient material is brought to bear on the present lives of the character. Narratively, picture England, late 1500s, early 1600s. Plagues. Theaters shut down, theaters reopen. Theaters shut down again as a result of more plagues. A writer, in this case we'll call him the poet, is part of an artistic urban community which may have a more permissive moral code than the population at large. The community is filled with actors, artists, writers, passionate, fun-loving, scofflaw libertines, where sexual promiscuity is not uncommon. The poet becomes a guide or a counselor to a young man, a very good-looking young man who we'll call Gorgeous George, for no other reason than that I like that name, and the relationship between the poet and Gorgeous George blooms. One take is that they become best friends with no sexual shenanigans going on between them. Another take is that they become lovers. In my opinion, both of these are valid and possible. And all of the sexual innuendo that goes on in the first 126 sonnets could possibly be just locker room talk, dick jokes, and maybe wink and a nod at homosexuality or the idea of homosexuality, or just sex talk between dude bros. That sometimes happens, like for instance between Romeo and Mercutio, for instance. So we'll consider the heterosexual best friend case first, even though heterosexual and homosexual are anachronistic terms. They had no such thing in Elizabethan times. But let's consider the best friend first. The poet gets involved with a dark-haired, dark-eyed woman who we'll call Mistress Raven, who may already be involved with someone else. She may possibly be married, or she may possibly just be playing the field. The poet sends Gorgeous George over to Mistress Raven's place to plead his case, so that Gorgeous George should say to Mistress Raven, hey, the poet really, really likes you for more than just sex. For more than just sex. So, you two should get together. And while he's there, Mistress Raven and Gorgeous George develop their own little entanglement. And Gorgeous George knows why the poet is so enthralled with her. The poet finds out. And this does not go over well. Yes, sure, we're all permissive, fun-loving people, but really, no, we're not. You're my best friend, and she's my mistress, and I feel doubly betrayed, says the poet. The poet dumps Gorgeous George as his friend, and the mistress, Mistress Raven, dumps the poet because she's just not that into him. And the poet, at the end, ends up all alone. Devastating. I hereby pronounce Shakespeare's 1609 quarto of sonnets from 1 to 154 a tragic love story. If we consider the two men as lovers instead of just friends, all of this still works, but in my estimation, when, sex friends may come and go, literally, but losing a friend with no entanglements of sexuality involved, who has been kind of a soulmate, his second self, that could be even more devastating. And the idea that he lost this because of betrayal it's devastating either way. They're both devastating losses, whether it's a betrayal of a lover or a betrayal of a best friend. Someone who you thought you could trust forever and ever and ever, and find out that no, you actually can't. So the poet's in a sorry state. It's a tragic love story, very satisfying, but very sad at the same time. So now, let's talk about sex. There are some who feel that reading sexual innuendo into so many of these sonnets is an overreach, and I have to confess that at times I felt similarly. But I am now convinced that reading sexual subtext in this particular sonnet series is absolutely essential. Shakespeare's sonnet series is all about erotic, romantic love, and it's very unlike previous chaste, chivalric, stalkerish, in love at first sight sonnet cycles like Petrarch's. In Sidney's Astrophil and Stella, Astrophil sneaks a kiss from Stella while she's sleeping, and she finds out and gets mad, and she still rebuffs him. And Samuel Daniel's Delia, the narrator bemoans his chaste desire, and many of these other sonnet cycles don't grapple with the messy fun and betrayal of sexuality, and Shakespeare does. Shakespeare's narrator is anything but chaste, and this is what makes this sonnet series different and fun and funny and sad and absolutely tragic at the end when he loses everything and ends up all alone. I feel for the guy. This sonnet cycle makes the other sonnet cycles seem like exercises in a schoolboy crush. This is an adult dealing with adult themes. Now, Shakespeare's dramatic tragedies are mostly political, but this is a personal tragedy, not of unrequited love like those other sonnet series, but of love gone wrong. And also friendship and love. Friendship and romantic love often go hand in hand too, where your lover is your best friend. And friendship and romance overlap, and it just makes it even that much more devastating as far as I'm concerned. So that is that. 2023 marks the year we finish all 154 sonnets in William Shakespeare's The Sonnets in the 1609 quarto. I will make one more video in 2024 to discuss A Lover's Complaint for a complete wrap-up. But for now, all I have to say is thank you. Thank you for accompanying me. Oh, I can't cry.
Now I'm getting a little verklempt. Talk amongst yourselves.
Thank you. Thank you for accompanying me, for spurring me along, for sharing your wonderful observations all along on this crazy, crazy ride. Your presence here has been an invaluable source of, yes, wonder to me. Thank you for your time, and most especially, thank you for your attention. I hope every kind of love you deserve fills your life and lifts you up. I am Tootight Lautrec, signing off from the Sonnetarium. Mwah. Mwah. Mwah.